Well, hello friends, Mr. Mark here. Well, actually it's Mark Gagne, but I've been called Mr. Mark pretty much my entire life, so I go with that. I'd like to say thank you to all my friends at Truck That for this opportunity to be a part of your truck driver documentary. So I grew up in Essex County, Ontario, Canada. Essex County is the most southern county in Ontario. Essex County butts up to the Detroit River. So we're neighbors with Michigan. Detroit is approximately 60 miles from where I live now, which is in Kent County. And I still live on a farm. So, farm boy. So having said that, I grew up on a farm, always been around trucks, tractors. In fact, I got my start at an early age. As you can see in this picture right here, 3 years old, I was driving a go-kart. My father had built me a go-kart with a lawnmower motor on it, and I was trucking around at 3 years old on my go-kart. At an early age, I had a great desire for trucks and tractors. Basically, that's all I ever thought about was trucks and tractors. That's all I ever wanted to do was drive the truck or drive the tractor, one or the other. In fact, if I could have done both at the same time, I probably would have done that. At an early age, I also had a great desire for photography. And I have the first camera here that was given to me by my grandmother. This is a Kodak Brownie. In fact, I wore this camera out. The shutter no longer works in this camera. So, leading up to something here. Like I said, I had a desire for to be a truck driver. Really, that's what I wanted to do, was be a truck driver. But at the age of 18, I was still too young to get my commercial driver's license. At that time, you had to be 21 years old. So a friend had suggested, Mark, there's a masonry course at St. Clair College. Is something you might want to look into. You know, you seem to be cut out for that sort of thing. And so that's what I did. I went to St. Clair College, enrolled in the Masons course, 4-year apprenticeship, and became a brick mason. Truck driving, actually, the desire for truck driving had sort of weaned off at that point. 1981 rolled around and we had a major slowdown in construction. Now I make a decision. Need to make a career change because this one's not moving. So I got my AZ license. And the first truck that I drove was this one right here. And I believe that was a 1977 Freightliner. I know it was a Freightliner, but I think it was a 1977. It was the first truck I drove. Lots of stories about that. Going down the hills in North Carolina, barbecuing the brakes. Well, here I am. I'm truck driving, right? Got a new camera, Canon camera, taking lots of pictures. And I get a call from driver owner. The year is 1985, February, which happens to be my birthday month, February. I get a call that they knew I was a photographer, they knew I was driving truck, and would I be interested in articles. So this is the Greg Atkins article, and it was my first truck article. Well, it's year 2007. My son and I are running 2G's trucking, and I get a call from a truck magazine, truck news magazine out of Toronto. They've seen my photography and apparently heard that I was a trucking photographer and asked if they would, if I would be interested in a documentary. Of course. So I went to Toronto and met with the fellow and did the interview, and it was printed. Well, while in this interview, I was asked if I would be interested in having a monthly article in the Truck News magazine, which is what I did, right? So now we're back to scheduling. And I had a list of people that I really wanted to document because they had nice equipment, right? So, but at this time I had more time. It worked. It worked for me. And that's what I did, was put a series of articles in. This happens to be the Jeff Wigfield article. It was very popular. It still is. So, I think it's the year 2006, and this truck right here, I had driven this truck for a friend of mine for a couple of years, and my son and I saw an opportunity to open our own company. It was called 2G's Trucking, 2G's, two Gagnes, and we purchased this truck from the fellow that I was running it for, and we started our own company. So I ran this truck, my son and I ran this truck for a couple of years under our own authority, 2G's Trucking. Okay, so how do we go about bringing positivity? How do we go about bringing a change back into this industry? We talk about this. It's becoming a topic that we hear about daily. What it was like back in the 80s. And I started in the 80s, so I know what it was like in the 80s. Here's a very simple little thing to start the industry back on track. Here we have truck stop scenario. We have a young driver, and it's obvious they're a young driver, female, male, whatever, it doesn't matter. They could be green. They're having difficulty backing up, okay? Here we have 15 truck drivers sitting at their wheel making comments about this dumbass truck driver that doesn't know how to back up, right? Forgetting that everyone has to start somewhere. Well, back in the 80s, that's not how we did it. When someone was backing up, there would be a driver at the left corner, a driver at the right corner, and there'd be probably 2 or 3 at the back, and they're waving one another on, and we're laughing and joking about it, making sure that we're just doing our part, right? That's what truck drivers did, was they helped one another in simple little areas like getting one another backed in safely. That one simple little act starts changing the industry back towards what it was like in the industries. And it all starts with me and you. It starts with us, one individual at a time. And really, when you think about it, it's for our own good. I know personally, when I help someone and when I get back in my truck and I'm sitting, I feel good about myself, right? I feel good about being a truck driver and what it means to be an assistant to my brother or my sister. So that's the beginning of turning the industry, or a beginning of turning the industry back to what it was, a brotherhood. Well, the question's been asked, what is the craziest thing I've seen while being out on the road as a truck driver? And that's a little difficult to prioritize which one is the craziest, because each new crazy thing seems to top the last. But there is one in particular, and it's more interesting than it is crazy. It's 2008, 2009. It's in the spring. I'm in Saskatchewan, and I'm driving this truck, hauling seed corn from Ontario to, well, pretty much everywhere Western Canada, Western United States. I just happened to be Western Canada at this time. And I had drove by this property a number of times and thought it was quite unique and interesting. There was old tractors, there was some combines, wagons. It just was unique. Well, this one particular Sunday morning, there's very little traffic, and there's this fellow standing out in his yard. He's got a cowboy hat on, big white beard, long white hair, cowboy boots on the outside of his pants, and he's waving at me. Now, between where I was and his property was a large ditch. Now, it's spring, the frost is coming out of the ground, and I'm heavy, right? We're maxed right out. And I thought, well, in order to get to where this fellow is, I had to go down, make a right on a small dirt road, and come up to his property, which is what I did. Now, keep in mind, I'm a photographer. I have in mind of taking pictures, making videos, presenting the trucking industry with unique situations. That's what's going off. Daily, I'm thinking about this. So I go down, I make my turn, I come back up, and out comes this fellow. He's running at me. When I pulled up, now this is a dirt road. It's a skinny dirt road. I'm in the middle of the dirt road. And he comes running up at me and he says, You're the one that's going to make me famous. You're the one that's going to make me famous. Now think about this. I have this going off in my mind for months about how I want to interview people, how I want to present them to the public, how I want to show the public what it is to be a truck driver. I mean, from my perspective, this is what I see, and this is what I wanted to share with. Called himself Old George. In fact, the sign out in front of his property says Old George. And to keep this short, I'm going to show you some photographs of what I experienced at Old George's. The man had found unique little buildings out in the prairies, and the one I'm sitting in, is a beaver trapper's lodge. He somehow moved this building. It's an authentic beaver trapper's lodge. Moved it to his property, and there were several buildings on his property that he had moved. This particular photo of Old George standing in front of the wagon with the bones. Now, that should give you some indication of just how unique this man was. Old George. I could tell you a long story about visiting with Old George, but this is just to keep it short and give you an idea of just a few. I have hundreds and hundreds of interesting stories where the photography has led me to people inviting me in for dinner, showing me their uniqueness, and me getting some very interesting photography from that. So that's one of my interesting stories. Well, friends, thank you so much for this opportunity to share my story with you at Truck That. and I am really looking forward to sharing more stories, more photography, and presenting the trucking industry with doable ideas to make a change in a positive direction. So thank you so very much for your time, your precious time, and until we meet again.